Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Banners Fly Forever football show. After a little hiatus, Dan and Tim are back again. And at what better time? Combine week. Combine happened last week. We had some amazing performances, some all time record performances,
Yeah.
even. We had draft risers, we had draft fallers. There is so much to get into. So let's not delay. Tim, this is the hot button question. I didn't prep you on this. What combine event do you think you would do best at?
Oh, me?
Yes, you personally.
Oh man. The interviews.
The interviews, I like
Yeah.
that one.
No, I mean like maybe the bench press or something is probably more my alley than not the 40-yard dash. Rich
Yeah.
Eisen, when they do the thing where like Rich Eisen is overlaid with like whoever the slowest player is, it'd be like the slowest player, Rich Eisen, and then me way in the back behind that. So yeah. How about you?
Um, I gotta say vertical.
Okay.
I
You
I
got some
used to
hops.
play basketball in high school, so
Sure.
hopefully I haven't lost, all of
Too,
that,
too much of the hops.
all of that completely. So, but all right, I just wanted to do a little quick icebreaker. But
Yeah.
this combine, it felt like it was both bigger and smaller
Yeah.
than past combines. To get started, we're going to dive right into the quarterback class. And I got to say, the highlight of watching the combine live had to have been watching Sam Hartman run the 40, s- finish his 40 with his long flowing locks. I was watching my wife, even she's like, wow, his hair is amazing. And then I've never seen this before. They had to do like a timeout
Yeah.
because he was the only
The only
quarterback in
quarterback.
his group running the
Yeah.
40-yard dash.
Yeah.
I
It,
mean, the 40 and the bench are kind of two of the more irrelevant drills when it comes to the quarterback position,
yeah.
but to see almost an entire group sit out of one event is pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very different year in some of that context. I mean, obviously, we'll get into when we're talking the quarterbacks here, kind of our top three guys really not participating really at all. And, one of them not even giving medicals out. It's maybe a changing of the guard of how this event is kind of run. Players that were near the top of the class don't, necessarily think they need to show off anything more. They've put the tape out there. They're already being projected to be top 10 picks. Why go out there and possibly hurt your stock? Why go out there and have any bad tape that you could put out there when there's plenty of good tape already and plenty of talk all the way around you? But what was kind of nice about that too is I felt like a lot of the guys that are in, the middle level prospects or, late first round is probably like the top guys that are competing in the combine. But there were a lot more guys that were getting recognition, I felt like, because the spotlight wasn't being stolen by the top names out there. When you have, Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. both not participating, all the other wide receivers in this class are getting all of the talk and all of the buzz. So it does allow for a lot more at least name recognition for, common football fans that are watching it maybe, and not really familiar with the college game or seeing these guys before. So that was kind of nice about it. And then it doesn't hurt when you have a few records being broken and, some big scores going up. So it was a really interesting year for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, this has been a theme of the whole pre-draft cycle is, how COVID years and NIL money is
Mm-hmm.
still affecting things. COVID, I believe this might be the last year that we're going to see these, 24, 25-year-old super
Yeah.
seniors entering the draft. So fortunately, starting next year, possibly the year after, we'll start seeing your normal 22, 23-year-old seniors who've played, 4 maybe 5 years with a red shirt in there. But something I'm hearing, and I want to ask you about this, Tim, from a
Sure.
lot of different media outlets, is that the depth of this draft class is lacking. Like I've heard that day three picks are not what they were in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, my first thought when I hear about that is like, okay, how does that affect team draft strategy?
Sure.
Are people going to be looking to trade up? Are they going to be looking to trade out of the draft
Yeah.
class? The last time I think we saw something with such a drastic effect was the 2020 COVID draft,
Mm-hmm.
when teams didn't have access to basically meet with the players for interviews, meet for medicals, and I feel like that draft was fairly wacky
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
way it played out.
Yeah.
So could we be in for another crazy, Thursday, Friday night where, we can't keep up the draft order because it's changing every 5 minutes.
Right. I mean, I think there will be some movement. I mean, the fact is though, we do this, every year, every couple of years, we have where, the next class is going to be the best one, or there's not as much as before, but there's always going to be guys, right? Like there's going to be fifth and sixth round picks this year that become NFL starters that you weren't expecting. I do know that of the position groups, wide receivers very deep this year. And there are a lot of offensive linemen in this draft that are intriguing to a lot of teams, both in tackle and some of the interior linemen, to start the draft. And then, yes, it does start to it kind of hits a point and then just falls off the edge. Secondary isn't as strong probably as some recent years. Running back is definitely down compared to recent years. But we're always going to find something in the draft, and for every time that we hear, oh, the draft isn't, it's not that great of a class, that ends up being a better class. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the quarterback class on Patrick Mahomes' year was like, who's actually gonna be good. We don't really know if there's any good quarterbacks in this class, and Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes were in that class. So you really never know what's going to come out of the class. But I do know that with it being kind of a more shallow class, like you were saying, I don't know if teams are going to be trading out of the day 2 picks. I think that's kind of like the area that I think is going to be stockpile.
Yeah.
Why trade out around 3 to get, a 4, a 5, and a 6 when
Yeah.
they're not really worthwhile there?
I think another thing we're going to see a lot of is veterans being traded draft
Yeah.
weekend,
Yeah.
for those 6th, those 7th round picks.
Hmm.
Like, for a contending franchise, that's a great move. You send a 6th or 7th and you pick up a guy who's maybe 31, 32, but you only need him for a year to make a push in the playoffs. And that's
Right.
kind of, perfect scenario.
Absolutely. And I mean, we saw guys, if you want to talk like veterans, I mean, like DeAndre Swift was traded for what, like a 6th round pick or something last year to the Eagles. I mean, it wasn't even
It
that.
was like a bag of potato chips, I feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, like guys don't even have to be like, oh, he's 29, so he's done or anything. It's just like, well, we're a pretty good team. We made the playoffs last year, and we need a tight end, or we need a running back, or we need a corner or something like that. And there's going to be guys that are going to be available for trades for any of those competing teams, because there's going to be a ton of teams that kind of know, like, this isn't our year. Let's get a 6th round pick and take another shot at something in this
Yeah.
draft.
All right, so let's go position group by position group and break down offensive side, our kind of our takeaways, our favorite moments, and I want to start with the quarterbacks here because it's football. Every conversation starts with the quarterback.
Exactly.
Every draft class is analyzed based on the number of quarterbacks that are gone in the first
For
round,
sure.
and I think, I mean, this is not like serious draft talk. This is just as a fun moment. Howitzer Joe Milton launching bombs
Yeah.
in the deep pass drill was
Yeah.
just a joy to watch. I mean,
Absolutely.
I watched so many slow motion clips because he just makes it look so effortlessly.
Sure. And something to mention is, if there was a big change, and it wasn't, I mean, it's progressively gotten better. The more access that the NFL has given to photographers and videographers that get out on the field, the more amazing clips we're getting. I mean, like,
Yes,
getting to
yes.
go on like Brett Coleman's timeline and just see like these awesome angles of 40-yard dashes and deep 74-yard passes and stuff is just like, this is awesome. Like, it's so
Yeah,
fun to watch.
yeah, it's
Um,
amazing footage.
Absolutely. So, if you ever needed like a highlight package, and you were kind of a mid-round prospect, like the combine might end up being the best thing to get your package of video reels together. But yeah, Milton just tossing the ball 74 yards with no problem on a dime. It's like somebody was saying, like, man, if only every pass could be 60 to 70 yards down the field, and there was never a point to throw under 20 yards, he'd be a high prospect here.
I
But
saw I
unfortunately,
I did see a scouting report this weekend, and it was like, for the casual fans just tuning in, thinking that Joe Milton is the next Josh Allen, here's my 2 sentence scouting report. If you need 70 yards, Joe Milton will give you 70 yards. If you need 20 yards, Joe Milton will give you 70
yeah,
yards.
exactly. That's exactly right. Yep, exactly.
so,
Yeah,
so for
he's
everyone tuning in who is just kind of getting to the draft coverage, Tennessee quarterback Joe Milton, fun guy, huge arm, probably going to be a 7th round draft pick or
yeah,
UDFA.
absolutely. Yeah. It's going to take a real certain situation for him to see the field and be super successful at the next level. But
Well, there
Doesn't
is
take
the
away from the
thought
fact that
with now the rule you get the emergency third quarterback. It
exactly.
doesn't count
Yep.
against your roster spot. Do you have like a DH, a designated Hail Mary specialist?
That's exactly right. I mean, like if you have like Kirk Cousins or something as your quarterback next year, and you're going like, yeah, Kirk really is only getting it, about 60 yards downfield, and we're at our own 35. We'll put Joe in, just have him launch it, So yeah, it's totally a possibility. Or like, if you're in third and 20, you just go, all right, we're going to arm punt this and just have him launch it here. So let him pick it off and we'll tackle him at the 10. This is better than a punt.
So, all right, so let's take this conversation from the back of the draft and
For
let's head
sure.
out to the front of the draft. We
Absolutely.
had obviously you alluded to before, we had Caleb, Drake May, Jaden Daniels all skipping out on the
Hmm.
combine. They were all there because it doesn't get a lot of press coverage, but one of the more important parts of the combine is the interview process.
Yeah.
Um, a change that the NFL made a few years back, which I still don't agree with, but I see why they did. They want these events on primetime TV for the ratings for the views, but back in the day, the events used to take place during the afternoon.
Yeah.
They were daytime events, and the
Exactly.
players would eat, shower, and then process their interviews.
Hmm.
The NFL kind of flipped the script so you can watch these events in primetime TV, but that just means the kids are interviewing all day long and then have to go out there and compete. Which
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of detractors say that it's not conducive to the best of these players' abilities.
Right. Right. Absolutely. You're getting a little exhausted trying to be on your A game, talking to 10, 15, 20 different teams. And now, all right, I got to go get in my shorts and, get out on the field and try to actually perform. It's like you're kind of mentally not there. And so it's hard to get that focus back in. So not the most optimal. But it does make sense. I mean, that the three guys here that we're talking about have been mocked in, at the worst, the top five kind of in every mock draft for the last month at least. You're assuming that none of these guys are getting outside of the top 10, if the top five. So why go out there again and put out tape that's not going to be something to help a team want to trade up to get you or to
Or
take you?
or injury also.
Absolutely,
I don't
100%.
know if you watched the defensive line drills on the first day, but man, those guys were slipping all over the place.
Absolutely. When there was last year, there was who someone got hurt in the combine.
Yes, it was the Ravens drafted him in the 7th round.
Yeah, it
He
was
was
like an offensive lineman, right?
a guard from USC. I can't
Yep.
remember his
Yeah.
name,
Exactly. Yep.
but
And that's, I mean, that's a huge bummer. Is like you got all the way to this moment. You're performing in front of teams, and now look, your draft stock just plummeted because you got hurt while everyone was standing there watching you. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the nice moment from that, not nice, but like kind of funny story was he actually went on and did the bench press drill.
Yeah.
He had an air cast on his leg,
Yep.
had to
And he
elevate it just
dominated. Yeah.
yeah, and he dominated, which it's heartbreaking for kid to go out there. And
Yeah.
from what I'm hearing, not to side tangent too much, he is making full recovery.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's the
Andrew
Baltimore
Voorhees,
Ravens.
right?
Ozzie, yeah, Ozzie Newsome masterclass of the draft last year. He's going to get a starting guard in the
Yeah.
7th round.
Absolutely.
So
They always do it. The Ravens are always great at that. But I mean, the one thing that can be said is all of the teams are there, right? So you still fly into town. Caleb comes into town, Drake comes into town, Jaden comes into town. They're meeting with all the teams. As a Bears fan, I obviously had a lot of interest in what these guys were saying. So I would like to note that I watched a ton of interviews with Caleb Williams, talking to the Mike Florios of the world and ESPN, and anybody that was there was trying to get Caleb to talk. And the one thing I took away from it was, well, I guess two things: is there seemed to be a lot of confidence, and he seemed to be able to handle the spotlight quite a bit, which is a worry for a guy who's coming out and he's going to be the number one pick. He's in a big market like Chicago. If the Bears are to select him number one, how does he handle that spotlight? And he's also, making some waves. He's not going to give out his medicals to every team by doing the medicals at the combine, and is only going to give the medicals of the teams that could possibly get up and draft him and stuff. So that's not common practice. And it's a guy who's coming into the league with the most money ever earned, probably in NIL money. So that changes things a little bit. So I was impressed by the way Caleb spoke. It seemed like he was very dedicated to his game. All the kind of rumors going around about will he want to play in Chicago? What does his dad want him to do? All that stuff. I'm not saying it's put to bed, but it's definitely, I feel a little bit better about all of it. And the general feel from at least, where I'm living and everything is, if we didn't know what the Bears plan was going into the combine, I think it's pretty set now. It sure seems like they're moving on from Justin Fields and that they're going to be drafting a quarterback at number 1.
Yeah, and that's a conversation we can get into another episode because we'll spend 45 minutes on where Justin Fields
Exactly.
lands. But let's talk for a minute about the quarterbacks we did see compete.
Sure.
Because that's kind of like the second tier of quarterbacks. You got your J.J. McCarthy, your Bo Nix, your Michael Penix Jr., and then to a lesser extent, you got your Spencer Rattlers, your Caden Slovises and stuff. But let's talk about those three quarterbacks,
Sure.
Nix, Penix, and McCarthy. Did anything this past week change for you about where those guys are, one, ranked amongst each other, and two, where in the first round you have them projected to go?
Sure. I don't think much has changed as far as kind of where I have them ordered. But I do know with kind of a combination of the combine, training programs that they go through, but also from kind of the rumors of the interview process, JJ McCarthy's name is just kind of flying up like mock drafts and boards.
Sky high.
Diana Rossini said, today or on yesterday that she talked to a very respected GM who thinks that there are going to be 4 quarterbacks taken 1, 2, 3, and 4, with the 4th being JJ McCarthy. And I mean, a month ago, I would have said you probably can get him, near the end of the first round, start of the second round, maybe. I don't know if he's going to get out of the top 10 now. And that's changed pretty dramatically. And I thought he looked good in some of the drills and everything. I didn't think it was like mind blowing or unbelievable, but you can see the snap on the ball. You can see that he does have a good arm. He can throw it hard. I think he was clocked at 61 miles an hour or something on the, the speed of throw, which I don't know how that correlates to actual success in the NFL, but he did do that.
Right next to Joe Milton.
Exactly.
Whatever that's worth.
Exactly. I'm not sure, like in historical context, if guys that throw harder are better. I think it's like the 40-yard dash, right? That some of the fastest guys to ever run it never turned into anything. But either way, he did look good. I thought Michael Penix actually had a pretty strong set of drills when I was watching him. I thought he showed that he can throw. It didn't hurt that at one point he was throwing to Roma Dunze, so there's some familiarity to some of the guys he was throwing to. But I thought he looked solid. And I think Spencer Rattler actually is going up boards as well. I know you were kind of first on this. We talked about it in our episode when we were going to fix the Giants, but I think there's a lot of the intangibles and the things that you want to see in a quarterback that these scouts and GMs are seeing in it that go, we can coach him up and we can get him to where he needs to be, especially for, maybe a 3rd round pick or, a late day 2 pick.
Yeah, because I mean, natural arm talent is just so hard to come by.
Yeah.
Look, arm talent got Zach Wilson drafted 2nd overall.
Yeah.
One
throw in his pro day got him drafted 2nd overall.
And obviously that didn't work out, but we see with the way modern NFL rosters are constructed, you have to take those swings. The biggest thing for competing, and I believe you said this, is you either need an elite quarterback or a cheap quarterback. And if you get both at the same time, you're probably you're probably in the playoffs, competing for a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So franchises are just going to take swing after swing. There's been plenty of draft prospects at the quarterback position that have been inflated just on what ifs. Look at Trey Lance, Daniel Jones. Like the list goes on, and it's worth the risk every time, because when it hits, you got your Patrick Mahomes, you got your Justin Herberts, you got your Jalen Hurts in the second round.
Right.
So I think he will find a spot on day 2 somewhere. There's going to be some team that has a slightly below par quarterback, a slightly old quarterback, or a slightly expensive quarterback who's going to say like, hey, yes, we could take tackle 10, we could take cornerback 8, 9, or we could take a shot on this kid who, if he hits, we have 4 cheap years of a great quarterback. And if he misses, then, guess what? 3rd round tackles don't hit every time either. So that's why I think that he will be a late day 2 prospect at the end of the day.
Sure.
Now, obviously, we don't get
e
to meet these guys, so we don't know, like,
of course.
attitude wise, because that was his whole thing. He's the Netflix documentary. He is kind of like a sore loser when he lost the job to Caleb at Oklahoma.
Sure.
So, but everything I've heard now, let me put an asterisk there because these sources have purposes. Everything I've heard is that Spencer has really turned everything around and is
Mhm.
like, really into the process right now.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see where he lands on draft night.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before we move on to the next positional group, I wanted to read you a quote real quick. This is Caleb Williams related. And it was one that I haven't talked to you about this before, but I saw this and I wanted to blindly throw it at you and get your reaction on it because I think this has to do with how GMs and teams see things and how people out of football and different things. So let's say I don't see Lawrence or Burrow, the coach said. I see those guys on the next level, but Caleb seems to be more pro ready than Drake May. The oft quirky coach was the only one of the 6 experts who said he wouldn't take Caleb Williams with the first choice. I'd pick another top player, he says, or I would trade back and I would take Michigan quarterback JJ McCarthy. I think he could have the tools to be special. What do you think about the idea of this quote of trading back from the first pick overall, the top quarterback, and going back further to getting a quarterback in this draft in particular?
So this isn't even like a Caleb discussion thing. This is just like a
Sure.
draft strategy
And,
roster
and exactly,
construction.
this is just exactly,
Like,
exactly.
yes, in a perfect world, I'd trade back with Atlanta,
Hmm.
fall in the back half of the top 10. Atlanta trades up to take McCarthy, and oh my God, Caleb fell, and look at the haul we got. But like
Sure.
you, it's so hard to play that game, because
Exactly.
you have to remember at the end of the day, these general managers are people with jobs who want to remain employed.
Right.
And guess what? If you trade back and Caleb goes one pick in front of you, and then you're out of quarterback options,
Mhm.
that's a pretty quick ticket to unemployment status.
Absolutely. And
So
if you're in the market for a quarterback, instead of trading back and taking, the fourth one off the board, wouldn't you want to take the number one on your board? Like, isn't
yeah,
that the hope and idea?
and and
Well,
and like, so what are you gaming the system for? Like
exactly.
because in this example, it's Caleb versus JJ. So that would be like a Washington and Bears trade because I don't see Caleb making it past Washington. Kid grew up in Washington,
Yeah.
so you're gaining what, a day two pick?
Right.
Is that what
Exactly.
you're gambling
Is
with
that
day
what the
two?
gamble's worth?
Yeah.
Well, let me actually read you the real quote because that wasn't quite it. I don't see Favre or Elway. I see those guys on the next level, but Peyton Manning seems to be more pro ready than Ryan Leaf. I'd pick another top player, though. I would take Michigan quarterback Brian Greasy. I think he could have the tools to be special. And the reason
Can
I
I
bring up
wait?
that
Can I
quote,
can I guess who that quote was?
go for it.
Mel Kiper,
It was Bill Walsh.
Bill Walsh.
Yeah,
Oh,
Coach
okay.
Bill Walsh. But what's interesting about it is this is from the point of the 1998 draft, right? And we don't know if Peyton Manning is going to be special. We think he's the top prospect in the draft. We're not sure if he's going to be special, but we get to this time of year, especially with quarterbacks, and this conversation always comes up. And we break down the combine and we go, "Oh, he's got the tools for this, or he can do this, or he's more pro ready than this guy." And sometimes it just comes down to what the best talent is that's there. And this isn't to say that Caleb Williams is the next Peyton Manning or that he's going to be the next, big thing. But I think it's interesting because, and I wanted to bring it up because we get to this time of year and we start over analyzing every single thing. And sometimes it just comes down to just being like, is he the best guy on our board? We're taking that guy. And I think that's important. And I think more and more teams get caught up in all of the little, intricacies of, well, this is a little bit better than this, and this is a little bit better than that, when really, you can kind of just look at a piece of paper and go like, that seems like that's the best one. We should take that guy. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because it was a quote that I had seen and I was kind of like, yeah, I feel like this happens every year. My friend Jim, who works at the Athletic, he was on our draft show last year. Said that he was at a dinner and someone was mentioning that the quarterback class next year is actually looking better than it is this year, which I feel like is, damn, this is every
Every
year we
year,
do this, don't we?
every year we say it.
when we were talking Bryce Young last year, everybody was talking Caleb this year, right?
And I do like, I use this example actually, and people start doing this. Let us go back 2 short years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you know who was being mocked as the top 2 picks? Sam Howell and
Mhm.
Spencer Rattler.
Yep.
So please, let's pump the brakes on it.
Exactly.
Yes, the
Exactly.
next quarterback class has the potential to be great. There's great guys, yada yada yada. Stuff like that happens. Sam Howell loses weapons, and then he falls in the draft, and he wants from Washington. And now he's getting replaced by his heir apparent at North Carolina. Funnily enough, possibly. And then you got Spencer Rattler, who everyone loved his arm talent, and he lost his job to Caleb Williams,
Yep.
who's potentially going number 1 overall in this draft. So
Exactly.
everything with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. So, and with that, we'll move on to our next positional group. So let's talk a little bit about the running backs. I said a little earlier, Dan, that this class is a little lighter on top tier talent than we've seen in years past. Especially, you and I are both fantasy football players. And when you're kind of looking down the draft board, you're like, man, I don't even know when I will take one of these rookies. But it does feel like in recent years, we've had running backs fall further and further into the draft. And this year, without any major top end talent, that could happen again. But there were some guys that showed a lot at the combine, a little bit more than I think people were anticipating. So a few of those names, I know Trey Benson looked really, really good. Jalen Wright, Isaac, I'm going to screw up his name, the Louisville Garendo, I think.
Garendo, yeah.
Yeah, Garendo. All had really, really strong combines. And I think there's going to be a couple teams, knowing that there's so many running backs being let go right now or being cut. There are going to be some teams that are going to be considering it when we get near the end of day 2, start of day 3. Is there anybody in that list that you think has set themselves apart in this class? Braylon Allen's another one, that we can mention here. Is there anybody that you think through the combine set themselves apart, or do you think we're still kind of in a jumbled mess of a lot of guys in this like kind of second tier of draft prospects?
I mean, I think it's still very messy. I think what is the problem with this running back class is it's a lot of specialists. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, what flavor of running back do you need?
Yeah.
Do you need a pounded in type of running back, who's going to get caught in the open field? That's Blake Corum. Do you need a guy who's got the quickness to do a one cut and go? That's your Trey Benson.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a wide receiver option? Like, hey, we got a guy from Purdue, Tyrone Tracy. He played wide receiver for 4
Yeah.
years. So
Yeah.
you have many different flavors, I would say, of running
Yeah.
back. There is no Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, like do it
Mm-hmm.
all type of running back. So I think a lot of these guys are going to be great contributors to whatever team they land on. I
Sure.
just don't think any of these guys are ever going to be like the guy type of thing. But we're
Yeah.
also seeing that across the league, like, between
Mm-hmm.
contracts and construction, like it's becoming more of a committee approach. Um, I mean, my favorite running back that competed this weekend was Trey Benson out of
Sure.
Florida State. And I didn't get a chance to share this with you, but I actually figured out the perfect landing spot for Trey Benson.
Okay.
The Los Angeles Chargers in the second round
Ooh.
in the Greg Roman offense with
Yeah.
Eckler there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. That
that
is
is that is my
very
my
interesting.
that is my dream. I'm trying to talk it into existence.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. I
But,
mean.
and then, even, like, there's running backs who didn't compete, who weren't here.
Mhm.
Like, my running back one right now is Jonathan Brooks, the kid from
Sure.
Texas.
Sure.
And funnily enough, last year we had Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson, 2 Texas running backs. And as luck would have it, we have Jonathan Brooks didn't compete, and then we have Keelan Robinson, who ran a 4.42
Yeah.
out of Texas.
Yeah.
So University of Texas, the new RBU, I guess.
RBU.
Yeah. So, um, I'll be interested to see. I mean, because I don't think we're gonna get into it during this episode, but the
Yep.
free agent running back class is also
Exactly.
quite loaded, and I don't know how that affects how the NFL is going to draft these guys,
Sure.
because you got your Derrick Henrys, your Austin Ecklers. They want veteran contracts. How many more years are you getting out of them?
Mhm.
Versus, like in the Derrick Henry case, not a very like for like comp, but like, do you just grab Blake Corum in the
Sure.
second versus signing Derrick Henry?
Sure.
With Austin Eckler, do you just grab like a Jalen Wright in the third instead of paying Austin Eckler? So
Right.
it's going to be very, and then the thing is, I think what is going to be a ripple effect is we're not going to see these free agent running backs signing until
Mhm.
after the draft is over.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be what I think is going to be really interesting is free agency is going to start up and we could see a couple guys like maybe Saquon, maybe Jacobs or something like that, find their team pretty early on. But a lot of these guys, I think it could just be like most teams could just be like, we're going to wait until the draft plays out. I mean, if we can get one of these young guys in the 5th round that's going to have a nothing rookie contract that could produce for us at least some decent, some decent carries, that's probably better than having to pay,
Tony
Tony
Pollard, $8 million
Pollard,
a year.
yeah,
Yeah.
Tony Pollard or DeAndre Swift or, whatever J.K. Dobbins' legs have left in them after, 100 different injuries. And so there's so many different free agents that are out there. And I think when you know the game and you've been following these guys, it's like, man, there's a ton of big names. The running back market's going to be crazy. But I think running backs are just kind of a dime a dozen in a lot of ways now. They're either getting too old or their rookie contract is done and you don't want to pay them a top dollar when you know you can get similar production from a 4th, 5th round guy in the draft. So yeah, like you said, I think a lot of these running backs probably won't find a home until after the draft plays out. And that's where maybe some of these guys boost up in your rankings when you're going into the year, because you go, man, I didn't think this guy was going to be that decent of an option, but he landed on this team and there's only one other running back there. And it's another guy who was drafted in the 4th round. So he's gonna have every opportunity to succeed. So we're going to have to wait for it to all play out. But I can tell you one thing, this is the position group I have like the least, I feel like I have the least knowledge of like where they're going to go in the draft. They could all go day 3 for all I know. But I think we'll see some guys go in day 2 for sure.
Yeah, because at a certain point, it becomes a value. You
Exactly.
know, we see it every year. A position group gets faded, and then all of a sudden, like, oh wow, it's value. And unfortunately, it's usually your middle linebackers and your running
Yeah,
backs. Right now, those are
exactly.
the two positions
The
that are
two the two
not
positions the
very
Detroit
popular.
Lions used first round picks on last year.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Is there anything else you wanted to cover with the running backs before we jump into the most exciting part of the show?
Yeah, the only ones I'll say really quick is I think Corum looked pretty average in his testing. When he was actually running drills, that was when you were like, oh yeah, Blake Corum is actually, but his numbers are pretty pedestrian overall. I think Bucky Irving
The
kind of
one
hit.
thing
Sorry,
I
go ahead.
do want to mention with Corum,
Yep,
and I think I didn't hear anybody mention this during the coverage this weekend. Um, he's coming off an injury.
he is. Yeah,
Like his 2022 season
yeah,
and 2021 seasons were much better
yeah.
than his 2023 season. And we see this happen a lot with the running back position where guys will have, like Saquon, the guys will have a post injury year 1 down, and
Right.
then the next year they'll be truly back, and they'll perform much better. So now this is something that NFL teams have better access with, with medicals, and that's going to
Sure.
be, Michael Penix Jr., Latu. Like it's going to affect a lot of these players, how the medicals do look like.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really good point. It was just kind of interesting that he was taking part in so many of those drills,
Yeah,
being that, like you would think if it was like, he's probably not ready to run yet, that he may not have. But I mean, it is what it is. But it wasn't awesome looking. But I think he will get drafted somewhere. He had a, really good college career. Bucky Irving didn't have a whole lot to show. And Audric, it's Estime from Notre Dame.
Estime.
Estime,
I've heard Estime.
real slow 40,
Yeah,
4.71. We got linemen that aren't falling too far behind that. So that's not
Caden Slovis ran faster.
absolutely. So not a great time. So that is kind of the roundup of that class. I mean, more so probably some than exciting, but we should move on to what is exciting, Dan.
And what is exciting is this wide receiver class.
Absolutely.
There's so much to talk about. That's why I kind of wanted to get into it
Yeah.
earlier rather than later, because we could probably
Yes.
spend 2 hours on this.
Absolutely.
But Tim, I want to start with a fun fact during this
Okay.
segment. Okay. So going into this draft class, you have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., the 2 LSU wide receivers,
Hmm.
both projected first round picks. After the combine, we have the Texas kids, Xavier Worthy and AD Mitchell, who I
Yep.
think are making a serious, case for the first round. So my quiz for you is, how many times in the NFL draft history have 2 wide receivers from the same school been selected in the first round?
Whoa. That's a
This is a good.
really good question. In the same year.
Yep, same year.
Okay. I
I'll give you a hint. The last time was very recently.
was gonna say, I feel like this might have happened somewhat recently. Boy, oh boy. How many times in the history of the NFL?
Yep.
It can't be that many, can it?
No.
Uh, I'll say 5 times.
4 times.
4 times. Okay.
4 times. Now, this class has the chance to do something that's only happened once before ever,
Okay.
and that is having 2 schools each have 2 wide receivers go in the first round of the NFL
Oh,
draft. So
yes.
here's the complete history. So in 1997, the Florida Gators had Ike Hilliard and Riedel Anthony both
Sure.
selected in the first round. 2007 was the last time that 2 pairs of wide receivers went in the first round.
Okay.
You had Ted Ginn Jr. and Anthony Gonzalez from Ohio
Okay.
State,
Okay.
and then from LSU had Dwayne Bowe and Craig Davis. Now, the most recent example was another pair of Buckeyes, and they actually went back-to-back picks, Garrett
Garrett
Wilson
Wilson and
and
Chris
Chris
Olave.
Olave.
Yeah.
So in this draft class, we have the potential to get up to 5 and 6 total pairs of wide receivers from the
Wow.
same school going in the first round, which is something that'd be pretty cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more the class kind of starts to break down, it does feel like there's a strong chance that LSU is going to have, both Thomas and Neighbors for sure.
I
Go,
I I would almost say it's a lock at this
yeah.
point.
At this point, it feels close to a lock.
I know it's funny because like we talk so much and so often and we do so much content together,
Right.
but we actually haven't had a discussion about our position group rankings.
Sure. Absolutely. No, we haven't.
So let me ask you this, kind of put you on the spot.
Sure.
Where does Brian Thomas Jr. rank for you?
I believe he's my fourth receiver,
Me
honestly.
too. Okay. Yeah. So
So I mean, after the top three, which we kind of all, I think, are on the same page for. The thing about him is just that we've seen the production in school. He's 6'3". He's got the big frame. He's over 200 pounds, 6'3". It just feels like one of those guys that is going to give you a lot on the outside at the next level. And I just think he tested well again. That he's looked really solid this year with Jaden Daniels as his quarterback. That might have been maybe a little bit later of a breakout, but like he just looks like he's gonna be such a really good complementary receiver. I don't know if he'll ever be like the alpha of an offense, but I think he's well worth a first round pick and is going to be a very good complement to any team that he goes to.
I could see him. I mean, same school scouting, but I could see him having like a Jarvis Landry type of career.
Absolutely. Yep.
Where he has
Yep.
like 1 or 2 years where he is the guy, but most of his career he's secondary piece on an offense.
Right. Yep.
It's still worth a first round draft pick.
Right.
From an NFL standpoint.
Right. Well, and then the other school that would have any chance, I think, of having the other two guys in the first round would be Texas, but without the Raiders probably taking a speedster running or speedster wide receiver again, as their history would show, with Xavier Worthy breaking the 40 record. Probably not likely they both get into the first round, but I think they'll both be round 2 picks if I was to guess. But yeah, AD Mitchell, I think, is moving up boards as well. Has started to really kind of set himself apart from that middle of the pack. I think I think we talked really briefly about how there's the top three. There's Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, and then there's just this big middle area and who's going to kind of set themselves apart. And I think Mitchell and Brian Thomas and maybe Troy Franklin are kind of the ones that are starting to get themselves a little ahead of the other ones, but there's still so much time and so many other things that are going to happen. That, I mean, literally who goes number 5 wide receiver could be, your and my number 12 guy.
Yeah.
There's just, and again, this is a little bit like what's your flavor. What we were talking with the running backs as well, right? Because for every Brian Thomas, there's also the Lad McConkeys and Roman Wilsons that are in this draft that could be a complete different set skill set that a team is like that's what we're looking for. I mean, even like Malachi Corley is another guy that falls right into that zone of being like, yeah, we're looking for a slot possession receiver that can get us yak. That's what we want. And those guys are going to be valued a lot here.
Yeah, then you have on your other end of your spectrum, you have your Keon Coleman's and your Johnny Wilsons, like
Exactly.
big,
Yep.
big, big, type of
Yep.
guys.
Exactly.
So let me ask you, because I think we're both in agreement that Xavier Worthy's 40 was probably the most exciting, fun part
Yeah.
of the wide receiver drills. Uh, who is there any wide receiver that kind of fell a little bit in your rankings after watching them compete in the drills?
That fell a little bit. Gosh, I have to give it some thought here. Um, no one's really standing out like immediately to me as somebody that fell from where they were. But is there anybody in mind that you had that you were
Yeah, I
thinking of?
wanted to mention Troy Franklin.
Okay.
Troy Franklin, from Oregon, I think was a probably a top 10 wide receiver in this
Yeah.
class for a lot of people, and he still might be top 10 for me, but his gauntlet drill was not
That was yeah.
not very good. Yeah.
Yes.
So for those that don't know, the gauntlet is the one that's probably the most fun to watch because you got the receivers running, catching passes from both sides, and just from the camera angles they show, it's like, okay, yeah, caught it, caught it, caught it, caught it.
Yep.
The thing that a lot of the coaches want you to do, and they'll watch it from a different camera angle, is they want that to be a
Dead straight line.
line,
Yep.
straight line. And if you watch Troy Franklin go, he was kind of,
All over the place.
serpentining
Yeah.
all over the place. And the reason why that's bad is because his serpentine was such a way that he was going away from the ball and hence giving himself more time to adjust
Right.
and make that catch. So,
Right.
um, is it a little thing? Yes, but this is also the event of little things.
Right. Of
You know, we
course.
got we got Xavier Worthy. He goes from a 4-2-2 to unofficial to corrected a 4-2-1, and
Yeah.
that changes. That's literally the littlest of thing that
Yeah.
changes the whole storyline.
1/100th of
For
a
the
second.
event for
Yep.
him. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So it seems like it's nitpicking, but that's because this is the nitpicking event where we have to hone in on these things, and
Right.
it's like some of these prospects. There's like a hair between between each of them, which is going to make. I mean, God, like you think about our conversation when we started the show, how the class is not that deep, and day two picks are going to be so valuable because nobody
Mhm.
wants the day three picks, and now we're talking about the running backs, how it's like, choose your own flavor running back. The wide receivers is choose your own
Yeah.
flavor wide receiver. Like, there's going to be so many of them going on day two that
Right.
Friday night this year of the draft is going to be one of the more exciting
Absolutely.
Friday nights in a couple years that we've had for the NFL draft.
Absolutely. I will say because now the talk this week has started to shift a little bit of there's so many receivers in this class that do you want to be taking one, with a high priority pick because you can still get a pretty decent guy in the second or third round. But I know we didn't see Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors test, but man, the gauntlet that Roma Dunze had was there were a couple in there that I was just like this guy is awesome. And every year I feel like, and I know like singing the praises of who was probably the best prospect out there is pointless, but there every year there, when you're watching the combine, there's always a few guys that I always use the word effortless, that they just make it look like they're not doing anything special.
Gliding,
They're
just
just
gliding
gliding
down
and
the
playing
field.
football.
Yep.
Last year, the one that stuck out to me, and I know it's easy to say in hindsight, but you and I were talking about this, but CJ Stroud's testing when he was throwing last year, it looked like he was just like, this is just what I do. I just step back and I hit perfect dimes everywhere on the field. It didn't look like it was taking any effort at all. And that's what a Dunze looked like out there for so many of the drills. I was just like, this guy is an NFL receiver. And when you watch that, I think there is like a huge difference that you can see with like the guys that are the elite prospects and then the guys that are like, maybe we can get this out of them. Maybe we can get something out of them. And Adunze looks like the real deal. So all of the talk this week that's kind of gotten into like, are you better off not using a top 10 pick on one of these top guys because you can still get a really good player in day two? There is a definite difference still with those top three in my mind, at least.
Yeah, and not to get to a different position group, but I've seen a lot of people saying the same thing with the tackle class.
Mm-hmm.
But the tackles at the top of the class, like you're talking about, like, an NFL starter versus, a contributor at some point.
Exactly.
And the wide receiver, it's the same way. These top three guys, they're going to start day one. They're going to start week one. And I cannot wait to see them lined up against, NFL corners. And then you get to day two, like, yes, you're going to get starters, quote unquote, out of those picks, but you're not going to get difference makers. I mean, you can, there's
Right.
there's always your Puka Nakuas, there's always your second
I'm on
round
St. Brown's. Yeah.
DK Metcalfs,
Yep.
and stuff like that. But like, yeah, just the difference is so night and day.
Yeah.
It's like we talk about the quarterbacks and trading back. Like, just don't get cute with it. Just
Exactly.
just take the guy.
Exactly.
This sometimes listen, we haven't talked about it a bunch because we did it on another show, but we are literally called banners fly forever.
Yep.
That is the phrase that we use when we talk about fantasy football, but it applies to the NFL also. Like, yes, you picked up an extra second round pick, or yes, you picked an extra fourth rounder in 2026, but now you have maybe a subpar athlete that doesn't get you to, the division title or the Super Bowl. But guess what? The banner, the title, like, they fly forever. Like, it
Right.
doesn't matter how you got to that point. It doesn't matter how much draft capital or how much salary you
Exactly.
spent. Nobody's ever going to remember any of that. I bet you, you go to the casual NFL fan who's just started following the past 2 years, and
Mhm.
you ask them, hey, what pick was Patrick Mahomes in his draft? I guarantee
One.
you none of them are gonna say pick 11 or 12 or
No.
whatever it was at the
No.
time. They're like, "Oh, he's the top pick.
10.
He was
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
quarterback." Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Exactly.
Because
Nope.
people just care about the titles, banners fly
Exactly.
forever. That's
And
why we say
that's
it.
what matters. Exactly. And I mean, there's for every trade back, and I get the idea of, put more bullets in the chamber, take more shots at different positional groups. You have so many different spots you have to fill. But you think about the players that win you championships. Like, there's a reason why Patrick Mahomes has 3 rings. And yeah, he wasn't taken first overall. He was still taking 10 in the draft. These guys are difference making players, and they alone, one guy can be the difference between being a wild card team and being a Super Bowl favorite. And when you have the opportunity to take a game changer like that, blue chip style players, you have to capitalize on that opportunity. So there's, I think, more and more fans out there that are kind of getting into that mold of like, I'm a GM and I want to trade back because trading back is smart. And like, that's kind of the general thought process now, is like, getting more picks is the smarter way. And I'm a savvy GM, but like, there are plenty of reasons why you don't necessarily trade back when you're in the position of a prime blue chip style player. And I think there's a few of them in this draft. It's not crazy deep though of those blue chip guys. I think the defense has a couple, then the offense has about 10-ish, but then when you're getting outside of that, it starts getting into like, the borderline spot. So if you're in the top of the draft, there's a reason why you're up there. You were a bad team and you need to find a game changer.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about 2 other storylines real fast while we're on the
Sure.
wide receiver position. So you mentioned Roman Dunze, the wide receiver from Washington. And did you see the story about him and the was the 3-cone drill?
Yeah.
So for those who haven't seen, he wanted a certain time on the 3-cone, and he didn't care if it was going to be official or not because he
Right.
ran out of attempts. But he just personally wanted this time, and he was out there till I think like past midnight, just like running the drill over and over
He
and
kept
over
knocking over one of
again.
the cones, and yeah,
Yeah, and I mean that's going to go noticed.
absolutely.
Stuff like that does not go unnoticed. Now,
Absolutely. It's also a stage to do that at,
yeah,
like
so
where
I was
every
gonna
NFL
say,
team is
let me
there.
pump the brakes. Was it a pure, just like, I love the game, I want to prove to myself moment? Maybe not. Maybe his
Sure.
agent was like, hey man, I got this idea. You can, put this out there, and the GMs are gonna be like, oh my God, he's such a hard worker. I don't know that for a fact, but
Yeah.
when I saw the story, it did pop in like, oh wow, that's a real good, for his publisher to
Yeah.
push out
Be
there.
able to put that
So
out there.
um
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple years ago, there was the big talk that a bunch of people were out at dinner and they saw Malik Willis giving like his
Yeah,
leftovers to a
yeah,
homeless person or something
yeah,
like that. And they're like, oh man, that's so great. And I don't want to take anything away from that gesture because maybe it was just a genuine no, he didn't
yeah.
know anybody he was watching. And
The
that's a great
problem
thing.
is,
But
like,
also, yeah,
with the world we live in where everything's videotaped and social
exactly.
media, like, and sometimes scripted, like,
Right.
you can't really tell what's genuine anymore, and
Yeah.
that,
And
that
Indianapolis isn't like a crazy small city, but it's not huge. Like if
yeah.
you're around the area, it's just like be on your 100% best behavior, go over the top being the best person you can be all weekend.
Yeah. And I mean, and some of these players do really take that to heart,
Mhm.
because when I went down to the Senior Bowl in Mobile last year, um, one of my friends, John Vogel, who was on our show last year, he's been scouting for quite a while. We met up at a bar day one, and I was just kind of asking John, like, like, listen, I'll be honest, I got a little bit of nerves, my first time being around players, with this amount of access, what kind of advice do you have? And he goes, they don't know who you are. He's like, they don't know if you're a fantasy football writer or you work for the Athletic or, you're a scout for the Giants. They don't know who you are. So they are going to treat you with the utmost respect because
Right.
they have to assume that you're an important person.
Exactly.
And I can honestly say every player I talked to in person at that event did treat me with the utmost respect and
Sure.
took the time to answer all of my questions. And I'm
Sure.
sure at the combine it's the exact same way, because this is a job interview for all these kids.
Exactly.
And, you know, I, I wish I could say that these events and these stories were genuine, but, like, the cynic in all of us has to, at least, question
Absolutely.
question a little bit of
Sure, absolutely.
it.
I wanted to ask you, what did you think about Marvin Harrison's he didn't meet with the media, he didn't test, he didn't do it. It sounds like he's not even going to do a pro day. I mean, again, we talked earlier in this show. It's a different world in different style combine. But specifically with his choice, what did you think? I felt like it kind of went quieter than the Caleb Williams stuff, but it was definitely a big storyline.
It definitely went quieter on the Caleb stuff, and it makes me think, like, does having your family already in the inner circle of the NFL
Yeah,
affect this?
it could.
Like,
It
obviously his
definitely
dad
could.
knows all these coaches, he knows all these coordinators, he knows all these general managers. Like,
Right.
do they just say, like, oh, that's Marv's kid, so,
Yep.
we'll let it slide, whatever. I feel like that plays a very big part in it. Like, he's been around that, he's been there, they know him, so it's not, that big of a deal. Whereas Caleb is, like, an outsider, quote
Yeah.
unquote,
Yeah.
trying to get into that inner circle. So
Yeah.
I think that's why even the TV coverage that I was watching, like, really didn't seem to mention a
Yeah.
lot about Marv not being there, but Caleb, not testing, not giving his medicals was kind of like the talk for any amount of dead air, quiet time they had on TV.
No, totally. I mean, I think it was really immature, and I couldn't take him before pick 9, at least. That's how I feel about that decision. But I mean, I don't want to put anything out there that anybody can
He's not worth
misconstrue
the
and
top
just,
54 picks.
gosh, I would top 54. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I don't know, man. It seems pretty immature. I don't know. I think you probably want to take somebody else with your top 8 pick. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But yeah, anything else outside of? I mean, I know we covered quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. Was there anything else in any other positional groups that stuck out
Well,
to
I
you?
did have one more quick thing with the
Oh,
wide
sure.
receiver group. Devontae Walker from North
Okay. Cool.
Carolina.
Yep.
He was somebody who was getting, like, early second round hype
Yep.
amongst the scouting community. He went down to Mobile. He had a really rough Senior Bowl. He
Yeah.
was dropping a lot of things, just not a great event for him. He goes to the combine. He runs not only a 4.3640,
Yep.
but I watched every rep of his gauntlet drills, and
Yeah.
he was not dropping anything.
Yeah.
Hands catches on everything. So kudos to him for, like, really,
Absolutely. With the
getting on that,
pressure on.
yeah,
Yeah.
getting on that jugs machine, grinding, whatever he had to do to, like, really, and then maybe even just, like, getting mentally ready, because
Absolutely.
you watch the tape, he's got the ball skills, he's got the hands, it could have just been a thing where Mobile was, bigger than him.
Yeah.
And it's really good to see him turn it around and really help his draft stock this past week.
Absolutely. He felt like he was, after Mobile, the next Kayshawn Booty of like
Hmm.
this draft. And it was really nice to see that turnaround. Because I do like Tez Walker. I think there's a lot in his game that can be successful at the next level. So yeah, it was really really nice to see a pretty decent combine showing from him, because I think he's put himself back into that mix now in that kind of next tier.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's good to see. Did you want to make any comments about Xavier
yeah.
Leggett
Yeah,
or?
so we'll save Xavier Leggett for another show. So I am not on Xavier Leggett. I just cannot buy into a player that had less than 400 yards receiving his first
Big man run
three
fast though.
3 years of college. Big man run fast. But no, you were asking about other position
Yeah,
groups before
yeah,
I started that story. Um, the edge class, I think,
hmm,
has really taken a big step forward.
yeah,
You got Verse out of Florida State had like, crazy testing numbers. And so I think it's funny because like you watch the mock drafts nowadays and it's like what, like first six picks sometimes are all offensive players. And
yeah.
like, guys, they're still good defensive players
Sometimes it's
in.
like the first 10 picks. I mean, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so Jared Verse, Dallas Turner,
Dallas
they all
Turner.
tested well. I mean, Chop Robinson tested well, but
Mhm.
like I'm also the point where I'm not surprised if a Penn
A
State
Penn State
player
player.
tests
Yeah,
well. But that kind of brings up a point. Kalen King, the
yeah.
quarterback from Penn State, like
Mhm.
like
Bad.
preseason, going into this last year of college football, like people had him as like a top 5, top 6 corner on their
Right.
boards. He runs a 4.61 at the combine. Like you you went to Penn State, man. Like this is your time to shine.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what you've seen, but I've seen people saying that he's got to convert to safety to even
No,
get drafted at this point.
yeah, I mean it was that bad. I mean, it was rough, especially like you were kind of joking about it, but I mean, when you're coming out of Penn State and you see the numbers that these Penn State alums are putting up to have a really pedestrian set of scores, when whatever training they're getting through, that university is bringing out huge testing numbers over and over and over again. Man, his stock plummeted completely. I think it is going to be either a change of position or a team that just goes like, look, we had them graded pretty well before. Maybe there's something still in there. Who knows what's going on? But definitely has taken a dive. But I mean, yeah, Chop Robinson's really interesting only because like you can't deny those numbers, right? I mean, like they're just there is like a certain amount of hesitation you have to do for anything in the combine, where it's like, all right, that was really fast or that was really strong, but also like you got to play the game, and that's what the game's all about. But there is a correlation with how athletic you are and what your RAS score is turning into success in the NFL. And it's hard to deny when a guy when a guy has numbers like that at the combine. So I think he did well for himself in this past weekend for sure. Quinyon Mitchell, I think, is a name that we got to mention again. We've been talking about him, but arguably maybe the top cornerback taken now in the draft, which is like
Has
before.
anybody seen a bigger rise in pre-draft than
Exactly. I mean,
Quinyon?
before the Senior Bowl, we were talking probably second rounder, right? I mean, like,
Yep.
and now we're talking he could get up to near top 10 now at this
Yep.
point. Like,
And
and awesome. That's
I,
that's
I
that's
do I
very
do
cool.
want to I do want to point out something for the more casual fans out there because they might have missed why he's rising so fastly.
Mhm.
So he played at Toledo. It's a lower level of
Right.
competition generally, but he also played off coverage like almost exclusively.
Right.
He never played press man at all. So everyone's like, okay, he's an off coverage corner, which has a place, but not in the first round. And
Right.
then he goes to the Senior Bowl and he's asked to play press man coverage for kind of the first time in his career. And he
Mhm.
just like
Shutting down everyone.
dominates,
Yeah.
dominates like his first time. So that is the reason why Quinyon Mitchell has been like flying up draft boards because he
Yep.
proved that he can do it in various different ways, which is a huge thing. As we talk about like scheme flexibility, for defenses, it's huge.
Right.
And I
Well, and
have
also, I mean, when he's playing in college, right, and you're playing in the MAC, and you have Ohio or Northern Illinois or Miami, Ohio, and you see this guy who's shutting everything down that you're throwing his way, you're not going to attack that part of the field. Like, I mean, like there just isn't a lot of tape on him either because
Northern Illinois did.
yeah,
He
yes,
had his
absolutely.
4 interception game against that quarterback.
Exactly. So when you see that tape and you go like, hey, this kid had 4 picks. He's dominating on the field. Why don't we just not throw the ball his way? And so, I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? Is he, when you're playing in a lower conference like that, it doesn't mean you can't become a top 10 pick or anything, but it's kind of hard to put that really good tape together and to know like this guy is awesome when they're just not throwing it his way. And then he goes out and dominates the Senior Bowl, tests really well at the combine. I think it's a really fun story, and I'm really excited to see where he goes at the next level.
Yeah, I have a friend at work who is a Eagles fan, and
Okay.
I keep telling, man, if Quinyon is there in the 20s, like he's got to be an Eagle, definitely for
Absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Tim. Before we get out of here today, any closing thoughts on the combine?
Just, I mean, I think this event is really fun because I think the Senior Bowl in this is like the kickstart to being like the season has turned over, right? We had all the buildup of the playoffs, the great games of the playoffs, that awesome Super Bowl and overtime Super Bowl, so much fun, in the actual NFL games. And then it kind of shuts down for a little bit. The Senior Bowl happens. We start to get the hype back up. The combine happens. And now we're like dead into the off season. We're going to have free agency starting up next week. We have all of the buildup towards the draft, which is now under 2 months away. So there's a lot to be excited about. And if you're into, the NFL, the next great players are on the horizon of coming into the league. And that's what all of the excitement is. If you're a team that was struggling last year, the draft can change everything, that teams build up through that. And I don't know, man. I just start getting giddy this time of year because I think this is like when all of the fun happens in the NFL.
I agree. Everyone is undefeated as of right
Exactly.
now, and
Exactly.
that's everyone's got hopes and dreams and so much to look forward to. And you guys have to look forward on this channel is mock drafts, player evaluations, player profiles. This is peak content season for Tim and I. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow us on all our socials. We'll have plenty of content out for you guys the next few months. You guys take it easy and enjoy the pre-draft process.
Take
Have
care,
a good
everybody.
one.